3, 2, 1, go!
Hey folks, Aaron here. So, I want to talk about something real fast. You know, before we, obviously you know what the title is, you see that it's Goblin Slayer First Impression. And I want to talk about the kind of controversy with Goblin Slayer, and I think why we're getting this kind of onslaught of people disliking this show, and some people loving it, but mostly a lot of dislike. You know, I've noticed that there are a lot of people in the anime community that can't stand Goblin Slayer, and I understand why. You know, it kind of goes into this fantasy type of mentality where, you know, when you hear about something being fantasy, even if it's dark fantasy, you always know what to expect, because fantasy, for the most part, is something that's very unchangeable. You know, you might be able to take a story about orcs and goblins and various other mystical beings like elves, dwarves, etc. You might be able to change that and spin it into a very unique tale. But at the heart of it, you're always going to have elves, goblins, you know, dwarves, etc. That's going to be the meat and potatoes of your fantasy. You know, it's something that is kind of, unfortunately, just embedded into the fantasy world. There's very rarely any changes or mutations, I want to put it, as, you know, you can't really do much more than's already been done. Now, there are different stories out there in the fantasy world that, you know, have made, like, fictional beings. Like, for example, Lord of the Rings is a story that has made many fictional creatures. Like, you had wraiths, you had, those, I forget what they call the ring bearers. By the way, I apologize if I forget the name. I haven't read Lord of the Rings in a long time. I haven't watched the movies in a long time. Ring wraiths, I think they're called. But you have these characters and these beings that exist, and that's the exception to, you know, what I just said earlier, that it's one of the few that kind of goes outside the box and goes, you know what, let's take the same stuff that we see in other works and just alter it, you know, make it into our own thing, which is why I call it a mutation, because it's not entirely something we haven't seen before in fantasy, but it changes things. Now, with Goblin Slayer, here's where people are kind of on the fence with it. There's this nuance to it where it's dark. It's a dark fantasy. So, like Berserk, for example, which is also dark fantasy, it takes the fantasy elements that you come to know and love and puts a dark twist on it, of man, like almost like a horrific, mature take on it. And because it does that, people are like, oh, you know, I like this elements of it, but I don't like this. I don't like how they, you know, in the first episode, a girl gets raped by goblins, which is, by the way, like the series' main focus of enemies. Exception with episode 4, because, by the way, the first impression is going to be the first 4 episodes, so beyond that, you know, the show will do whatever it does, and then we'll have a full review when it comes out, obviously. But the thing is that, you know, it's the focus on goblins, and it's putting goblins in this limelight of, oh my god, these things are horrific creatures. You know, they will rape people, they will, you know, take people, they will kidnap children, they will kill families, they will burn villages down, they will do horrible things. And I think in many ways, you know, it's the whole story that makes this take of, oh, you know, instead of having people with names, you always have just like the priestess, or you have the warrior. You know, it seems like it's overly generic. It seems like this whole story is just using horror footage as a means of, oh, okay, this is how you put impact on a fantasy. You know, let's put a dark twist on everything just because we can. And here's my thing, though, is that I think Goblin Slayer works because of this. Because Goblin Slayer takes the fantastical, I couldn't even say that word, fantastical, that's what I'll put it as, and I apologize before for stuttering around with that. But it takes this fantasy kind of concept and goes, no, we can do it in a way that it still has that adventure feel. It still has this tone to it that these are adventures to a point. But as in episode 4, which is the newest episode, you know, the elf girl says it best, that the experiences they just had where they had to fight, you know, an ogre, and they had to fight all these goblins to kill them, and see this girl being raped by them, another time that a girl got raped. You know, she said, this is not an adventure. You know, I want to take Goblin Slayer on an actual adventure, or she calls them orc blog. But that's the beauty of the show, is that because it's taking what usually is an adventure and kind of almost twisting it into a dark realm. You know, that's, again, dark fantasy. That's how it's supposed to work. But that's why I like Goblin Slayer for what it is. You know, before the anime came out, I actually read the first light novel before it. I think the first 2, if we're being sincere with it. I want to say the first 2. I didn't go beyond that, because way back when, only the first 2 were out in translated versions. And so I couldn't read anything beyond it. And these are fan translations, so, you know, there's always a thing to it. I do plan on getting the series when it comes out. I believe the first volume I think came out in America. I do plan on buying that because I'm someone who, if I do read a fan translation or something, I do go purchase it. I know people are like, no, you don't. I'm like, yeah, I do. I did that with several series, like the Monogatari series. I read a lot of them originally in fan translations, but then I bought them as soon as they started coming out to America. And that's my way of kind of going, okay, listen, I might have read it originally online, but I want to go support it, and I want to actually buy the real series, and I want to see what's the original or a more, I don't want to say sophisticated version of translation, because there's some fan translators out there that do a really fantastic job of keeping things very close to what the source material is, but I want to see it in more of a way that's like, hey, this is how it's supposed to be. Goblin Slayer, when it came out, at least the fan translations of it, it wasn't a series that hit anyone's radar. I wasn't hearing anyone talk about this, light novel world, because I know a lot of people in the anime community, I know a lot of people in the manga community, I know also a lot of people in the light novel community that read light novels all the time. I didn't hear people talk about Goblin Slayer. I only saw a few people say, oh yeah, we saw it, it was, something. But I didn't really see a lot of people talk about it. And what was interesting about it was when I first read it, I was like, this is pretty good. This is quite dark, and it's pretty, like, impressive nonetheless, but yeah, I wish this was an anime. I doubted it ever would be an anime, but I could see it being an anime because it's very similar to Berserk. And lo and behold, I think it was maybe a year or maybe even 2 after that, finally we got an anime adaptation of it, or around a year, maybe it was a year. But the thing was that, like, I was curious what people would think, because when I read it, I remember going, oh, this is not your atypical fantasy. This is pretty messed up. You learn about this character called the Goblin Slayer, who lo and behold, is, I want to say, almost like hell bent on revenge against goblins. And you find out as the story progresses that things happen to him in his life that caused him to do this. Episode, I think 2 or 3 on the series shows a little bit more of Goblin Slayer's past, and it does it in a very smart way, where it doesn't just go, here we go, here's Goblin Slayer, this is his past. No, it does it in kind of a roundabout way by showing another character, them talking about something, and then putting little hints and kind of little tips and things here for you to go, okay, I'm piecing together what's happening. I see that he had a family, most likely was killed by goblins, and then lo and behold, he became the Goblin Slayer, who was just hell-bent on killing every goblin in existence. That's what makes his character so cool, though, is that because he doesn't give a shit about any of these other creatures. He doesn't care about ogres, he doesn't care about demons, he doesn't care about demon lords, he doesn't care about any of that crap. He cares solely about goblins and hobgoblins and goblin shamans and all these things that are just goblin related. That's all he focuses on. And people, I think, hate that about him, because, like, oh, he's supposed to be this kind of legendary warrior because he's such a high rank in the story. But people that are watching the show are like, how can a show be about this dude and all he cares about is goblins? Which, if you play video games or you play any MMO in general, goblins are like one of the few enemies that you can kill left and right and usually use them as level ups. Like, that's the farming monster. They usually aren't that great. And then you get this Goblin Slayer that you have, these things are smart. They're able to make traps. They're able to figure out ways of maiming someone if they, jump together. They can, they do all these things that are like just surprises and booby traps and all this. And that's why I'm like mystified that people don't like this show, because this is a dark show. I get it. It's something that's also, controversial because of what it does to women in the first episode. I mean, that, yeah, maybe a little bit much, but at the same time, it warns you on the beginning of this the thing. If you watch it on Crunchyroll, it tells you this is a mature show. This is like Berserk. Berserk has a multitude of rape scenes, people getting I want to say mutilated, and you have women that are basically like used as cannon fodder in Berserk. Goblin Slayer ain't doing much more. It's actually doing less than Berserk. And yet people love Berserk because it's like, oh my god, super mature. But then when you have Goblin Slayer, it's like, oh my god, too mature. It's what? It's the same thing. Again, Berserk, you have a girl getting raped by a horse almost. That became a demon horse. But still, it's like, what? Like, how can you say this is too much when that's 10 times worse? I don't understand. But, Goblin Slayer, I think, is people's this thing with just in general with the story. It's causing people to go into this realm of like, oh my god, horrible things. It's so mature. It's so dark. It's really not. It's dark. It's mature, but at the same token, it's not doing anything we haven't seen in dark fantasy. And again, it's dark fantasy. It's a horror. I think people don't see that headline. Like, that's the genre. It's a dark fantasy horror. You know, it's supposed to be mature. It's supposed to be something that's dark and foreboding, and it's just kind of messed up in general. But you know, it's how can you tell people what what to expect with the show? Like, I tell people, watch Goblin Slayer with this kind of ebb of caution to it, because it's something that isn't afraid to hold punches. And I'll tell you right now, if I don't know how much my memory serves me, so don't take this as 100% face value. But from what I know, from what I read up in the light novels, we're not even close to some of the more messed up things. I almost said the F word, but more messed up things this show is gonna do, and I know it's gonna come. And I mean, even if you don't, if you read the light novels and you just watch the show by itself, it should be kind of a thing that but it should be obvious, I should say. But the thing is that I'm actually enjoying Goblin Slayer. I think it's not a bad show at all. I don't think it's the greatest dark fantasy I've ever seen before. I've seen way better. But, like, again, Berserk is significantly better. There's more of a story to it. There's more emphasis on characters. There's more emphasis on world building. Goblin Slayer is very simple. It has a character who hates goblins. That's the ebb and flow of the whole story, that this is what this dude does. And episode 4 should kind of prove that even more when he fights the ogre. And, it just kills the ogre, not because he's, like, trying to defeat it. He doesn't give a crap about the ogre. He's just like, whatever, I'll kill you because you're standing in my way, and you're going to prevent me from doing what I got to do. That's what I like about his character. And I think that's what I like about the show. It's got a central focus to it that a lot of dark fantasies don't have. It doesn't make it the best story in the world? No. Does it make it the best, anime in the world? Hell no. But right now, if I had to give a Goblin Slayer A through F, I'm going to give it a solid B-, I think. You might say, oh, how could it be a B-? How could it be a solid? It's because, to me, like, if you were giving it like a grade point average from 100, it's basically at an 80 in my mind, because it can go either higher or very, very low, depending on from what it does further on. Animation-wise, Goblin Slayer is doing an excellent job. I think it's not anything. I don't think it's White Fox's best work, but it looks pretty good. It has some nice CGI for the characters. Sometimes when it does use, it's not used all the time, but it's used more for Goblin Slayer himself. It doesn't look bad though. I love the music. I love the opening and closing. I think those are really well done. I kind of like the dialogue. I think the voice actors did a really great job with the characters in general. Even though they're very simple, they do this thing where they do the characters pretty on point. You have Goblin Slayer, who's a man of few words, and he sounds like it. Like, the guy who's playing him, it sounds like a man of few words. Like someone you would hear maybe talk once in a while, and that's it. So I think the show is fun. I think the show is enjoyable. If you love dark fantasy, if you love mature content, you'll like that. Just go into it understanding that there's a reason why it warns you if you watch on Crunchyroll. And I think even some of the anime subsites probably do the same thing to a certain degree. This show is not for younger audiences. This is not a show that's meant for people that don't like mature content. There's some really messed up, jacked up stuff that happens in it. And again, it's just the beginning of this. So we're probably going to see more. But anyways, guys and girls, what are you thinking about Goblin Slayer? I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I apologize that I haven't really got this video out when I wanted to. I wanted to do it on episode 4's release, but unfortunately work happened and all this stuff, so I was kind of busy. But I'll talk to you guys later. God bless you all. If you actually like this type of video, because I'm not always going to do first impressions, but I do think it'd be kind of interesting to dabble with it, let me know in the comments below too, okay? I'll talk to you guys later. God bless. I said, what did I say at the very end of that? I said, like, it came out like God bless you, and then like changed into like blah blah blah, and I already said that. So it goes to show you I'm tired while I'm doing this video. But I'll talk to you later. Bye bye everyone.